I previously wrote this a few months ago in response to the question, what is your scariest road trip experience? I was in the United States Air Force, stationed in Omaha in the late 80s. At the time, I hung out with my roommate and another friend. My name is Tracy. My roommate's name was Tracy, ending with EY instead of Y, like mine. The girl we hung out with was Stacy. When we were together, everyone always thought we were lying, and being the silly teenagers we were, we always found it funny. One weekend, we decided to take a road trip to Kansas City, Missouri. We were speeding down the highway, laughing and singing at the top of our lungs. We were happy and having the time of our lives. Stacy was driving, and she had a bit of a lead foot. She must have been going too fast because before long a state trooper pulled up behind us and turned on his lights. Stacy immediately pulled over. By the time the officer made it to her window, she already had her license and registration in hand and the window down. The officer looked at her and then looked at me and Tracy. He then said, "I want you to follow me. Don't try to run off or y'all will be going to jail." He then turned, walked back to his car, and got in it. Needless to say, the three of us were puzzled and talking amongst ourselves, wondering why he just didn't take Stacy's identification and write her a ticket. The officer pulled out slowly, and we dropped in behind him and followed him down the road. He drove a few miles, then exited the highway. He drove a little ways and turned onto a dirt road that was surrounded by stalks of corn. We all stopped talking as we became more alarmed. However, being young, scared, and since he was a police officer, we continued to follow him. The officer drove for some time down this dirt road and then pulled into an area that had a big, beat-up old barn. As he stopped, and we stopped behind him, a group of men with shotguns exited the barn. It wasn't until that point did we realize we were in mortal danger, and panic set in. The officer walked back to our car and told Stacy to get out and follow him to his car. As she got out, she looked at me and Tracy, and there was sheer terror on her face. She followed him to his car, and he motioned her to get in on the passenger side. She did. Tracy and I were crying, and as the armed men stood on the side of the car looking at us, we began quietly praying for God to protect the three of us. We prayed that Stacy wasn't being hurt, and somehow they would let us leave. After some minutes, Stacy bolted out of the officer's car and ran back to the car and jumped in the driver's seat. She was crying hysterically, so of course, Tracy and I began crying harder. The officer got out of his car and walked back to our car, this time to Tracy's window, as she was in the front passenger seat. He asked, "Is it true all y'all are in the Air Force?" To which Tracy replied, "Yes, sir." The officer calmly said, "Get out of here and go back to where y'all came from. I better not see y'all again." As soon as he finished, Stacy turned on the car, whipped it around, and sped back down the dirt road. She somehow navigated back to the highway. As she drove back toward the base, the silence was only broken by an occasional sob from one of us. Stacy drove for a while, and as soon as we crossed back over into Nebraska, she pulled over on the side of the highway. She then began to sob heavily. Tracy and I hugged her and asked if she was hurt in any way. She shook her head no. She wasn't hurt. After she calmed down enough, she told us what happened in the police car. After she got in the car, she offered the police officer her identification and told him she was sorry for speeding. He took her information and then asked her, "What are you doing with those two niggers?" Stacy was white, She explained that we were on a road trip. He then told her that if she would do certain favors for him, he might let us go with a warning. At that, Stacy had a complete meltdown. I guess while he was waiting for her to calm down, he finally looked at her identification and saw that she had also given him her military ID. He asked her if we were all in the military, and between sobs, she had said we were. He asked where we were stationed, and she told him, Offutt Air Force Base. He then told her to go back to her car. As we sat there after Stacy told us what occurred, I think it hit all three of us at the same time that the only thing that saved us was that we were in the military and stationed at a nearby base. We hugged each other and cried until we could not cry anymore. We didn't report what had happened. Again, we were teenagers and didn't think we would be believed over a law enforcement officer. We never talked about it after that day. That incident has haunted me for years. All of the what ifs. But as I have gotten older, what haunts me more is the thought that others may not have been as lucky as we were. I was 18 years old when this happened, in my senior year of high school. I started dating a girl who lived an hour away in Bogalusa, Louisiana, and would frequently drive out to go see her on the weekends. Bogalusa sits along a river and is surrounded by swamps. In my opinion, it's an area notorious for heavy fog and flooding. It is also a rural area, and it wasn't uncommon for someone to hit a deer when traveling to and fro. Being a young driver, my parents would ask that I be home no later than 11 p.m. to avoid this. On this particular day, it rained heavily throughout, and at night, it would be a foggy trip back to my home. The first half of the trip was normal. I drove at posted speeds and occasionally slowed down when I saw eyes in the tree line. This contributed to the eerie air surrounding these drives. I always felt like there was something lurking about and was tempted to gun it out of there. The only way I can describe the feeling accurately is to say that it was an atmosphere of stillness. Lights barely penetrated the fog. The rain had stopped, and the road was abandoned. It was like all life had stopped. Time passed, and halfway through the drive, I had finally reached a small bit of civilization. A Dollar General store left its lights on. A railroad track weaved through the road, and ahead of me, a car pulled out of a McDonald's drive-thru. The car went pretty slow, which ticked me off because I had to meet curfew, but I stayed behind it in hopes that it would pull off soon. Following down the road, the car and myself left the little town. The path ahead was dark, so I kept a good following distance and tracked the car's taillights. I was exhausted. The car had pushed me past curfew, and tomorrow, Monday, I was going to have school. Dozing off, I rolled down the windows to get some cool air and kept following the car. Minutes passed. I was getting frustrated. We approached a railroad track that was slightly uphill, and being in a hurry, I pulled close behind the car I followed. Out of nowhere, the car in front of me jerked and skidded across the pavement. No more than 8 feet in front of me, an emaciated figure was curled onto the tracks, pale white with patchy bald hair. A man rocked back and forth, clawing at his face. I quickly threw the steering wheel to avoid him and swung my car around him. Maneuvering as best I could, I managed to dodge him and slammed on the brakes once I passed. The car that I was following sped along, out of sight. I was alone in surrounding fog. My heart was racing. I clicked on my hazards and unbuckled my seatbelt. Jutting myself out of the window, I stared back at what little the flashing lights could illuminate. Silence. Nothing except for the ticking of my blinkers. "Hello?" I gently cried out. "Are you all right? Did I hit you?" In the distance, The man slowly postured himself upright and turned his head toward me. He stood there silently, unmoving. And then he let out the most inhuman scream I have ever heard. Breaking into a full sprint, he ran toward my vehicle. I quickly threw the car into drive and sped off from the scene. Not more than a minute later, I found that the people I had been following earlier had decided to pull around and parked on the shoulder. I approached behind them and yelled out of the window, "Did you see that?" "Yeah, I'm going back," the driver responded to me, while he simultaneously called the police. We eventually came back to where the man had been, but there was nothing. Just an old railroad track. Edit. To this day, it's one of the most weird and scary things I have ever had happen to me. Hope I conveyed it well enough, and I'm sorry for all the extra details. I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friend, Amy, and I, both females, would spend many days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the quiet, desolate beauty of the desert. One afternoon in March of 2010, we were traveling from Ruidoso to Albuquerque. Always up for exploring, we took a back road rather than traveling the more direct highway. One leg of our journey had us on New Mexico 55, or NM 55. It's a remote, teeny tiny 2-lane highway. We loved those types of roads up until that day. This part of New Mexico is flat and desolate desert. You can see for miles, and there is virtually nothing except dirt and rock between towns, and towns can be miles apart. So we were on NM 55 going north. After a few minutes, we saw a white pickup truck ahead of us going the same direction. Suddenly, he stopped his truck sideways in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from him, and as we got closer, we began to get uneasy. We could see no reason for him to do this. We were the only other vehicle out there, and we began wondering if we should turn around rather than come up to him and have to stop. We were about a half-mile away from him when he pulled over to the opposite side of the highway, but his truck was still pointed the direction we were going. We tried to relax a little. Surely, this guy was a rancher or something. Maybe he was checking something on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. 1, there was only one person in the truck, a middle-aged guy who never took his eyes off of us. And 2, he was talking into a walkie-talkie. A few seconds after we passed him, he pulled back onto the highway and started following us. But he never got too close. He would get to within a few car lengths and then drop back a little and then speed back up again to within a few car lengths. We were getting nervous. We realized how alone we really were. We had seen no other traffic on that road, and we hadn't told anyone about our great idea to take this detour. We checked our cell phones, and neither one had a signal. Typical for New Mexico, but scary given our present situation. Amy was driving and speeding up, while I frantically checked the map, hoping to find a road that would have more traffic. There was no other road. We had to travel this one to get to the next town, Mountain Air. Turning around to go back the other way didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. He was going very, very slowly, maybe 20 miles per hour, if that. This pickup was old and beat up, whereas the one behind us was newer. Amy had us up to 75 miles per hour, which wasn't typical for us on these 55 mile per hour highways. And we blew by the old pickup. As we passed it, we saw that it was another middle-aged guy, and he was talking into a walkie-talkie. After the white pickup passed him, he pulled a U-turn and pulled in behind it. As we watched all this, we could see the white pickup truck guy talking into his walkie-talkie. No doubt these two knew each other. We were being deliberately followed. And for the first and only time in my life, I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road. We truly thought old beat-up pickup guy had set a trap up in the road and our vehicle would be disabled somehow. We talked about driving into the fields. We were in an SUV. But this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we went off-road and got cornered. So we stayed on the highway. By now, white pickup truck guy was right on top of us. We could see him talking into the walkie-talkie, and he stayed right on our bumper. An old, beat-up pickup truck guy was right on top of him. The three of us sped down the highway. The white pickup inched closer. His maneuvering and edging closer made it apparent that he was trying to bump us. I watched helplessly as he got to within inches of our back bumper. Amy floored it. We were passing 80 miles per hour and edging up to 90 miles per hour. The road was flat and deserted, but any little thing going wrong would have been catastrophic. We absolutely were not going to slow down or stop if we could help it. The white pickup pulled into the opposite lane and started to gain speed. The only thing we could think of was that he wanted to pass us and get in front of us. If he got in front of us and his buddy was behind us, then we'd be boxed in and trapped. We looked frantically at the rocky desert on both sides of us. Our only option was to off-road it. Should we risk it? Could we speed through the desert and make it to safety in one piece? As we topped a small incline, we saw a sign that said Salinas Pueblo, Missions National Monument, and it pointed towards a road on the left. And right at that moment, a blue pickup truck pulled out of that road and onto the highway in front of us. As we came up on the blue pickup, we saw the plates said U.S. Park Service. We looked at each other, and then behind us, both pickup trucks did U-turns and went the other way. We followed the blue pickup to Mountain Air and then made our way to Albuquerque. I don't know exactly what those guys' intentions were, but they weren't good. There is something seriously wrong out there. I notified the state police, and they said they would keep an eye on things. This area is very near Belen, New Mexico, which is where Tara Calico was abducted. It's also about 100 miles from Elephant Butte, New Mexico, which is where David Parker Ray had his little secret torture laboratory. We didn't put all that together until later. Even though David Parker Ray had died by the time this happened to us, we do believe that there are others out there like him. And whoever abducted Tara has never been caught. Or maybe we came into meth lab territory. But since this happened on an actual highway, rather than a backcountry road, I tend to discount the meth lab theory. Whatever is going on out there, it's not good. So, let's not ever meet, or have anyone else ever meet these guys.